Moving on, students in the East Central Canadian province of Quebec hold a fresh rally to press for tuition-free university studies. Students took to the streets of Montreal 2 days after the new Quebec government formally repealed a planned tuition hike at universities. Police have arrested at least 2 demonstrators after they threw projectiles that slightly hurt a policeman. The tuition fee issue had triggered months of angry and sometimes violent protests in Canada's French-speaking province. Now, students are looking ahead to a longer-term goal: free university education. Student union leaders have called their new demand feasible and desirable. Well, for more on these recent tuition protests, we're joined by our correspondent Joshua Blakeney, who's joining us from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Joshua, it seems that the demonstrators don't want the party to end. Is their demand for an altogether tuition-free university education feasible and logical?
Well, I think from the perspective of the students, who I'm sure anticipate to work for the rest of their lives in Quebec, most of them paying taxes into the Quebec coffers, to have access to education, even if you're working class, even if you're poor, for working class people to have the ability to fulfill their faculties. I'm sure from their perspective, it would be logical to demand that in a country like Canada that has so many resources, the province of Quebec especially has hydroelectric power, diamonds, a very fecund, resource-rich part of the world, with a very small population of about 7 million people. For them, it would be logical for that wealth to be redistributed to society via free education. I think the students realize that they've captured the zeitgeist. The leading student groups have an army of students, 100,000 strong. That's not an insignificant number of people. And from the perspective of Pauline Marois, the new premier of Quebec, she only was able in the September 4th election to form a minority government, to her disappointment. And so the students realize that they command from 100,000 Quebecers at least, and Pauline Marois needs votes. And so it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand how that might compute. If Pauline Marois was to allow or to promote free education in the not-so-distant future, the students may then vote for her in the next election, because to her disappointment, she didn't get a majority in the last election. And so Pauline Marois, the Premier of Quebec, will be looking to the next election where she will be seeking that majority. And the students probably quite astutely realize that they might be able to marshal their troops in her direction were she to endorse free education for all young people in Quebec.
And in the short run, how do you think the new Quebec government will respond to these recent demonstrations?
Well, as I say, it was a disappointment from Pauline Marois' perspective that the Parti Québécois only formed a minority government. And so she's already stated that she's going to be working really hard to fulfill her promises to the people of Quebec in order to win more votes a few years down the line when they have an election. But I think she certainly pleased the students insofar as she quashed the proposals of the Jean Charest government to increase tuition fees. She's rejected that. She's also rejected the draconian legislation which prohibited basic civil liberties in Quebec. And so I think the big story here, of course, is the defeat of the Jean Charest government and the victory of the students who came to the streets despite the propaganda against them, despite all the power structures being against them, and won a devastating victory against those in the Quebec elite who would like to have tax cuts on the 1% in that province. And to do so would, of course, have to reduce social spending by increasing things like tuition fees at universities. So this has been a victory for the students. They brought down one government, and they're not allowing themselves to be duped by any politicians. As I say, they've captured the zeitgeist. They're on the streets now, asking for the next phase of demand.
Press TV's Joshua Blakeney from Calgary. Many thanks for the update, Joshua. Well, that's it with the world news for now. It's been an action-packed day in the European soccer scene on Saturday. Razia is here to tell you